My Bible is open to 2 Chronicles chapter 24, and I encourage you to do the exact same thing. It's not too often that we either begin or include in any sermon 2 Chronicles. So this will hopefully be, if nothing else, a little bit of a dive into this book that I believe is vastly underrated. We look at Samuel, we look at Kings, but we don't oftentimes give 1st and 2nd Chronicles, in my opinion, the attention it deserves. And so we're going to hopefully do that a little bit with one of these stories in 2nd Chronicles. We're doing that in our Sunday morning class, if you're able to make it for those. We've been kind of engaged in this 2.5 month so far study of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles, and looking at those 6 books thematically rather than looking at them chronologically. I think one of the mistakes we make with books of history is we sometimes just take it in the order that it's meant instead of the way that it's written. And Chronicles is written in a very different way than Kings and Samuel is. Chronicles is written with an eye towards the remnant. It's with an eye towards the future. And you see some of that here in 2 Chronicles chapter 24. Specifically, what we talked about this morning was the reign of Joash. And Joash is a fantastic figure in Scripture alongside men like Josiah and Hezekiah. He's one of those men that instituted great reforms at a time, in my opinion, when it wasn't really that good to do so, or really that popular to do so. Joash, no doubt, encountered a lot of opposition, probably encountered a lot of antagonism, but he didn't go at it alone. As a matter of fact, the person that we overlooked in our study this morning is who we're going to spend the next 3 or 4 hours talking about in our sermon right now. We're going to look at a man by the name of Jehoiada. And Jehoiada, throughout the course of 2 Chronicles, chapters 22 through 24, instituted a revival at a time period when, as I mentioned before, not really that popular to do so. And the things that Jehoiada did, or the things that Jehoiada taught Joash to do, or led Joash to do, were not really that popular. Because instead of just tearing down religious idols or religious institutes, he's basically turning the culture of Israel, or the culture of Judah at that point, on its head. And Jehoiada, I would argue, was at the forefront of all of that. Just by way of brief recap, if you weren't here for our Bible class this morning, the whole story begins with probably one of the worst figures in Scripture, and that's a woman by the name of Athaliah. Actually, one passage ahead, so I'll keep that for right now. But the story starts with a woman named Athaliah. And Athaliah is the only queen that ever sat on the throne of Judah. She's not a particularly popular person. I think you can see within her own people, they're not really that into her. But she was a person who wielded unparalleled authority, at least for that time period. She started out her entire reign by killing all of the royal family, including her own grandkids. So that should tell you something about how ruthless she was at that point in time. Then you have Jehoiada comes on the scene. And Jehoiada takes the young king, or the young heir apparent Joash, he takes him and he hides him in the temple for about 6 or 7 years. And during that time period, Joash is basically completely secluded while Athaliah is running ramshot over the entire nation of Judah. And so Joash is kind of in waiting until Jehoiada orchestrates a coup to put Joash on the throne and basically remove Athaliah from power, which took a lot of organization. And then he serves as Joash's regent for a period of time. Joash is still only 7 years old at that point, and so Jehoiada is most likely the one that's making a lot of those decisions. And then keep in mind too, when we talk about Jehoiada, we're talking about somebody who is at least 90 to 100 years old. He's somebody that would live to be 130. Joash reigns for about 40 years. And so Jehoiada is doing all of these things well into his 90s or his 100s, 110. He is a pivotal figure much later in life. If you look in 2 Chronicles chapter 24, you see kind of his influence in 2 verses. His influence on the nation of Judah in 2 verses. 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verses 15 and 16. When it says, "Now when Jehoiada reached a ripe old age, he died." What a very colloquial way to say that. When he reached a ripe old age, he died. He was 130 years old at his death, which, as we mentioned in class, that's old even for that time period. We're used to thinking about people like Methuselah or Noah living to be 900 plus years old. That had pretty much died out centuries before this. So the fact that Jehoiada is living to be 130, that says something about him. But listen to verse 16. It says, "They buried him in the city of David among the kings because he had done well in Israel and to God and to his house." Even though we sometimes overlook figures like this, and I would argue that, or I would wager that if I asked everybody, show of hands, how many people had ever heard of Jehoiada before this morning, I would wager that probably about half the hands had gone up. I really hadn't thought much about him. But what you see in this passage, specifically in verse 16, is that even though he tends to be overlooked by modern audiences, he absolutely was not in that time period. He was somebody who was revered, he was somebody who was respected, and he was somebody who wielded an enormous amount of influence on the king of Judah, who with his help, who with Jehoiada's help, basically had this massive revival in a time period when the nation of Judah desperately needed it. I think you can look at Jehoiada's life, if you just kind of sum up the brief events of his life, I think you can sum up some really big lessons from him. Number one, I think you can see his mentorship of young Joash and just how much he was able to help him. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 22. Jump 2 chapters earlier to 2 Chronicles chapter 22. Starting in verse 11, 2 Chronicles chapter 22, you have his mentorship as regent of the nation of Judah, beginning with Joash. 2 Chronicles chapter 22, starting in verse 10, rather. Now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, that's Athaliah, the wicked queen we mentioned earlier, she arose and destroyed all the royal offspring of the house of Judah. But Jehoshaphat, the king's daughter, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons who were being put to death, and placed him and his nurse in the bedroom. So Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Jehoram, the wife of Jehoiada the priest, for she was the sister of Ahaziah. That shows you just how kind of inbred this whole royal lineage is. She hid him from Athaliah so that she would not be put to death. He was hidden with them in the house of God 6 years, while Athaliah reigned over the land. I mentioned a second ago, this is about Jehoiada. Ironically, in this section, there's more about his wife. But what you see from his wife, Jehoshaphat, alongside Jehoiada, who is the chief priest of the land, is they're directly disobeying the queen Athaliah at this time and taking Joash, who had the sentence of death on himself, and they hide him in the temple for 6 years, during that formative period of his life, when he's beginning to form opinions not only about God, but also about the world around him. And that mentorship by these two people at a very early age is what paves the way for his success later in life. And so Jehoiada and his wife didn't just take care of this person physically. They took care of him, I would argue, spiritually as well. But you see later during the coup, but that's when things start to pick up. And Jehoiada shines when he starts to recruit faithful individuals to set Joash, the proper king, back on the throne. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 23, the first 11 verses. Now in the 7th year, Jehoiada strengthened himself. And that's great foreshadowing for what's about to happen. He strengthens himself, and he took captains of hundreds. Azariah the son of Jehoram, Ishmael the son of Johanan, Azariah the son of Obed, Messiah the son of Bediah, Elishaphat the son of Zichri. And they entered into a covenant with him. They went throughout Judah. Notice that it's not just contained to Jerusalem, but they went throughout Judah. And they gathered the Levites from all the cities of Judah and the heads of the fathers' households of Israel. And they came to Jerusalem. So now they're reaching into the northern kingdom. Then all the assembly made a covenant with the king in the house of God. And Jehoiada said to them, Behold, the king's son shall reign, as the Lord has spoken concerning the sons of David. This is the thing which you shall do. 1/3 of you, of the priests and the Levites who come on the Sabbath, shall be gatekeepers. 1/3 shall be at the king's house, 1/3 at the gate of the foundation. And all the people shall be in the courts of the house of the Lord. But let no one enter the house of the Lord except the priests and the ministering Levites. They may enter, for they are holy. And let all the people keep the charge of the Lord. The Levites then will surround the Levites will surround the king, each man with his weapons in his hand. And whoever enters the house, let him be killed. Thus be with the king when he comes in and goes out. What you see happening in 2 Kings chapter 23 is Jehoiada instituting a coup. Now a coup would not be unfamiliar territory for these people. Most of the kings that would rise up in Israel during this time period very quickly assassinated and replaced with the person who killed them. So this was not an unusual thing that happens. But Jehoiada's interest is not just in restoring a king to the throne of Judah. His interest lays in restoring the proper king of Judah. And so he sticks his neck out. And that's the thing I really want to put across for this, is that he doesn't just do this by himself. He goes throughout all the leaders, the captains. He orchestrates the most influential people of the land, puts his name out there and says, we're going to do what God wants us to do. We're going to stick the right king on the throne. But notice that he doesn't just do it haphazardly. He makes sure that there's some kind of order to it. When you look at verse 8, building on this order, it says, the Levites and all Judah did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded. Each one of them took his men who were to come in on Sabbath with those who were to go out on the Sabbath. For Jehoiada the priest did not dismiss any of the divisions. Jehoiada the priest gave to the captains of hundreds the spears and the large and small shields which had been King David's, which were in the house of God. He stationed all the people, each man with his weapon in his hand, from the right side of the house to the left side of the house, by the altar, by the house around the king. And they brought out the king's son and put the crown on him, gave him the testimony, and made him king. And Jehoiada and his sons anointed him and said, "Long live the king." This is very similar to the way that Solomon would be instituted. If you remember way back in 2 Kings chapter 1, where his brother is trying to take the throne for himself, and David sticks Solomon on the throne before his brother can get there. That's essentially what's happening here with Jehoiada in 2 Chronicles chapter 23, where Athaliah is queen and she's reigning somewhere over there, but he sticks the proper king on the throne in full sight of everybody. And the only way he can do that is with the help of all these people who are loyal not only to Jehoiada, but loyal ultimately towards God. And you see this devotion carry over. If you look later, you see in verses 12 down through verse 15 this fear that Athaliah has. And the fact that she's eventually put to death because of her brutal regime, where not only did she directly disobey God, but she instituted murderous pagan sacrifices that dealt with slaughter of thousands. Then you have the reform starting in verse 16. Jehoiada made a covenant between himself and all the people and the king, that they would be the Lord's people. And all the people went to the house of Baal and they tore it down. And they broke in pieces his altars and his images. That's Baal's altars and images. They killed Matan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. Moreover, verse 18, Jehoiada placed the offices of the house of the Lord under the authority of the Levitical priests, whom David had assigned over the house of the Lord to offer with burnt offerings of the Lord, as it is written in the law of Moses, and with rejoicing and singing according to the order of David. He then, verse 19, stationed the gatekeepers of the house of the Lord, so that no one would enter who was in any way unclean. He took the captains of hundreds, he took the nobles, he took the rulers of the people, and all the people of the land. And he brought the king down from the house of the Lord, came through the upper gate to the king's house, and they placed the king upon the royal throne. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, because they had put Athaliah to death with the sword. This coup happens not because these people are interested in attaining power for themselves. This coup happens because these people are interested in attaining power for the rightful king, the one who should have been on the throne all the time, and restoring not just proper royalty, but also instituting proper spiritual lineage as well. You can see that also in the way that he organizes everything. We won't read all of this, but if you look in 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verses 4 down through verse 14, not only does he institute proper temple worship, but he puts the priests in the right place. He puts the utensils that were used for Baal worship in the right place. He puts taxes into place. Joash does with the help of Jehoiada, but he puts the taxes in place so that they can then restore the house of David, the house of God. It's not just about a coup. It's not just about power. What Jehoiada does in 2 Chronicles chapter 24, or 22 through 24, is he restores Judah back to the way that it should have been. And it's very easy for us to look at this list and think to ourselves, this is the way it should have always been. It's very easy for us to look at Jehoiada and say, well, of course he did this because God was with him. If I were in his shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. But it bears repeating the fact that Jehoiada did all these things well after he was 90 years old, which meant that he spent a lifetime's worth living under gross immorality. And not just immorality in the world around him, but immorality from the highest levels. And so what Jehoiada did was not just institute proper temple worship. He took the entire culture of the day and flipped it on its head and taught Joash how to reign in his absence. Now, Joash didn't eventually do that. Joash eventually turns evil once Jehoiada dies, but that's beside the fact. Jehoiada, for the time that he was alive, did everything he could to restore worship back to where it should have been. Which makes us ask the question, that's the end of that long marathon reading session. Wiley asked me what he should read. I wanted him to read all of that, so I didn't have to. But that is the long marathon reading session. But the question has to be asked, what can we learn from people like Jehoiada? It's easy to look at people like Josiah and Hezekiah and say, well, the reforms are what we need to focus on. And I think, and I believe honestly, that there comes a point in time where every church needs to take a step back and say to themselves, we need a revival. We need to examine our own works. We need to examine the systems. We need to examine the place that we're at and make sure that we're fully optimized. That we're doing everything we can to serve God, that there's no apathy there, that everyone's on fire for God, and a revival serves that purpose. That's what Jehoiada does. And so to help institute that revival, I'm not saying this is going to be the beginning of a whole wave of revivals from here on out, but in order to kind of kickstart that process, I want to ask a few questions. I want to ask first and foremost, can our work be organized better? Is there anything we can do at Hillside Church of Christ that can be organized better? We have a lot of people in this congregation that do a lot of fantastic things. And there are a lot of people that work overtime to make sure that the services, that the operation of this church flows nicely. I think there were 3 or 4 weeks in a row there where I was teaching class and I looked out into the hallway and saw a procession of Jews led by none other than Joyce and Janet back there. That takes foresight. That takes extra thinking. That takes planning to say, we're not just going to teach Bible class, but we're going to take our Bible class and make it more real for these kids. And so as we look at our services, as we look at our worship, as we look at our organization, is there anything that we can do better? And this goes from the top down. Elders, is there any way that we can better eld? Deacons, is there any way we can better deek? I already asked myself if I can preach any better. That's why you're getting this morning. But ask yourself the question, is there anything we can do better? By the way, the answer was a resounding yes. There's a lot of things I can do better. But members, is there anything that we can do better? One of the things that you see from this time period of Joash, we talked about it in our Bible class, not only with Joash, but you see it with Ezra and Nehemiah as well, is that when these leaders show up, Joash shows up, Jehoiada shows up, Ezra and Nehemiah show up, and they have a plan for the people, and they say, we're going to get back on track with God. We need you to do this, we need you to do this, we need you to do this. The people enthusiastically respond. And so the problem is not a problem of motivation. I would argue that we need plans. We need to think about what we can do better. We need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what can I be doing better at Hillside Church of Christ? I want you to look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. Paul is writing to a church that he loves dearly. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. This is a congregation that he has a lot of affection for. Taking that a step further, it's a congregation that is doing a lot of fantastic things right. This is not a church that's lackluster. It's not a church that's apathetic. And so in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, starting in verse 7, he's addressing some kind of ending questions, some kind of ending statements that he wants to make to these people. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, starting in verse 6, he says, "Now I command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you keep away from every brother who leads an unruly life, and not according to the tradition which you received from us. For you yourselves," verse 7, "know how you ought to follow our example, because we did not act in an undisciplined manner among you. Nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with labor and hardship we kept working night and day, so that we would not be a burden to any of you. Not because we don't have the right to do this, but in order to offer ourselves as a model for you, so that you would then also follow our example." Verse 10, "For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order. If anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either." I heard that every day growing up when I didn't do my chores before dinner. Verse 11, "For we hear that some among you are leading an undisciplined life." And that's that word that he carries earlier into verses 7, 8, and 9, that word undisciplined. He says, "We hear that some among you are leading an undisciplined life, doing no work at all, but acting like busybodies. Now such persons we command and exhort in the Lord Jesus Christ to work in quiet fashion and to eat their own bread. But as for you, brethren, do not grow weary of doing good." It's very easy for churches, and it's very easy for Christians, and I'm putting myself at the front of all this too. It's very easy for us as Christians to look around at the landscape of our local congregation and think to ourselves, things are plugging along pretty well. You know, we've got a handsome preacher, we've got great elders, we've got great deacons. The building has been rebuilt to accommodate a larger crowd. So there's a lot of things that are happening really well. And it's very easy for Christian X to then sit back and think to themselves, I'm just going to kind of coast. I'm just going to kind of go on autopilot. And the problem with that, as Paul talks about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, is you can't just coast. Don't grow weary in doing good. Think about how you can push yourself. If you're doing these acts of public worship, ask yourself, can I do these acts of public worship? If you've never taught a Bible class, ask yourself, can I teach a Bible class? Take it out of the public sphere. And you think to yourself, I've been talking about evangelizing this person, talking about the Bible for a long time. I've been thinking about it. But now I'm going to take a step further and actually talk to them about the gospel. Do you know what would happen to this local congregation if every single person here, and this is just as an example, if every single person here, all 112 of us, made the commitment right now, September 15th, that over the course of the next year, we would try to talk to one person and convert one person to God. The church would double. And it doesn't sound like much when we think about talking to one person, communicating to one person the gospel, but you see the effect of a lot of people doing that. And you can extrapolate that to a whole lot of other things. Whether it's talking about public worship, whether you're talking about private worship, but the energy of a bunch of people pushing together. The downfall is, as he mentions in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. When he mentions in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, starting in verse 11, he says that some of us, or some of you, are leading an undisciplined life, doing no work at all, but acting like busybodies. We just kind of go to or fro. We go here, we look at this situation, we go over here, we send some gossip, we try to tweak, we criticize, but we don't really do any work. Somebody has told me a long time ago, and I think it's an excellent point, that the best cure for church dissension, the best cure for church tension at all, is evangelism. And instead of looking inward, instead of looking at myself, and instead of trying to criticize every single person, I know I criticize Joe a lot, but he deserves it. Instead of trying to criticize everything, turn those energies outward and start thinking about how I can be a better Christian, how we can be a better church. And I guarantee you, even though I haven't cleared it with them, Paul, Shell, and Cody are ready for your ideas. All we have to do is take them to them. Ask yourself this question too. Who else can I list? Jehoiada, when he decided that it was time to put Joash on the throne, he didn't go by himself. Now, it probably would have resulted in his death, but he didn't go at it by himself. What he did was he took a whole bunch of people that he trusted, sticking his neck out there and saying, we have to do this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're talking about public worship, whether you're talking about private worship, the key to success lies in us banding together, to us working together. There was an entertainer during the period of World War II that went around and did a bunch of shows for soldiers. His name was Jimmy Durante. I might be mispronouncing that. I'm sure Samuel will correct me later. But Jimmy Durante was a... Did I butcher that? Okay, thanks. What is it actually? Durante. I didn't expect everybody to know that. I'm just going to call him Jimmy from this point out, because Durante sounds like a hot sauce. We'll just call him Jimmy. Jimmy did a whole bunch of shows around the period of World War II. And there was a promoter that asked him one time, can you come to a setting where we have a bunch of disabled veterans? These are actual war veterans that have been disabled in battle. So can you come and can you entertain them? And Jimmy, as we'll call him this morning, Jimmy said, that's a great idea, but my schedule's really packed. I've got other shows I need to fit in. I can only stay for about 10, 15 minutes, do a monologue, and then I'll have to hit the road. Yeah, I said, that's fine. Just come and do a little bit of whatever you can do. So Jimmy showed up. He did this show. 10 minutes turned into 15. 15 turned into 20. 20 turned into 30. 30 turned into an hour. And an hour turned into 2. And after Jimmy was finished, he went down and talked to the promoter, shaking his hand. And the promoter said, well, why is it that you stayed for as long as you did? I thought you had to hit the road. And Jimmy pointed the promoter to the front row. And when he showed him in the front row, amidst all of these disabled veterans, was one guy with the left hand and one guy with the right hand. And at every joke, they were clapping together. And he said, when you've got an audience like that, you can't help but continue on. But you know, that's what this congregation is built of. I'm not saying that a lot of us have a lot of left hands, a lot of us have a lot of right hands. But what I am saying is that we are greater than the sum of our parts. And we need to start thinking about that. We need to stop thinking in terms of what I can do to advance myself, or how I can do great things, or how I can help. But instead start thinking about how I can help other people. How can I help teach Bible class? How can I help evangelize? How can I help be of service to this local body of Christians? 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4, starting in verse 9. 3 verses here. 1 Peter chapter 4, starting in verse 9. Actually, starting in verse 7. 1 Peter chapter 4, starting in verse 7. Peter writes, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be of sound judgment, be of sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. And above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaint, as each one has received a special gift. Listen to this. Employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. You know what that means? Whatever you feel like your talent is, or wherever you feel like you can serve, whatever it feels like you're really good at, you're not good at that for your own glory. I'm not good at whatever it is. Whatever it is I'm good at for my own glory. It's useful and it's given to me so that I can serve other people. And In verse 11, whoever speaks is to do so as the one who is speaking the utterances of God. And whoever serves it is to do so as one who is serving by the strength which God supplies, so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belongs the glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. I love the way that Peter asks these questions and says these things. Because after he talks about being hospitable to one another and serving one another and asking ourselves how we can help each other, he finishes off by putting the priorities where they needed to be all. In verse 11, he says, after all of this, he says, to God be the glory and the dominion and the power forever and ever. Amen. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about individuals. It's about us. And it's ultimately all to the glory of God. I want to ask you this question too. What can I teach the next generation? Jehoiada's life, even though our knowledge of him starts when he was about 90, 100 years old, Jehoiada's life, as far as we're concerned, was caught up in his teaching of Joash. That's where he created his legacy. That's where he made the most impact, at least that we understand, at least that we can see. So ask yourself, what can you teach the next generation? We've talked about elders and deacons, we've talked about everybody else, but what we forget sometimes in the midst of a local congregation is that elders are great, deacons are great, but there are other people in the congregation that are fantastic leaders as well. Men and women that serve to inspire and to teach the next generation, that hold no formal office, that don't have their name on the flyers or the reports that come from overseas, that don't have any kind of formal fame to their name, but people that nevertheless serve and inspire an entire generation. And we have people in our congregation right now, and I'm thinking of at least 3 of them in my mind right now. We have people in this congregation right now that hold no formal office, but yet inspire great next generation. People that love and want to serve God. I want you to look, for instance, in Titus chapter 1. Titus chapter 1. Paul is giving his encouragement to the young evangelist. Titus chapter 1, starting in verse 5. He talks about the special emphasis that's placed on elders. He says in Titus chapter 1 and verse 5, he says, for this reason I left you in Crete, that you would set in order what remains and appoints elders in every city as I directed you. Namely, verse 6, if any man is above reproach, the husband of one wife, having children who believe, not accused of dissipation or rebellion, for the overseer must be above reproach as God's steward, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, not pugnacious, not fond of sordid grain, but hospitable, there's that word again, loving what is good, sensible, just, devout, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word, which is in accordance with the teaching, so that he will be able to exhort in sound doctrine and to refute those who contradict. These instructions by Paul towards Titus about the role of elders and about the qualification of elders are invaluable. But what they describe are leaders. They don't describe, ladies and gentlemen, the only people of influence in a local congregation. You know how I know that? Because the next chapter does. In Titus chapter 2, starting in verse 1, he says, as for you, speak the things which are fitting for sound doctrine. Older men are to be temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in faith, in love, and in perseverance. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the word of God will not be dishonored. Elders and deacons are not the only people of influence in a local congregation. I don't care how old you are, whether you're 16 or whether you're 650 or whatever that age, wherever that second age would have been. I lost train of my thought. I'm going to back up a second. I don't care how old you think you are, whether you're 16 or whether you're 600 years old. You can influence somebody. And I would argue right now that you are an influence to somebody. And there may be somebody sitting here this morning that thinks to themselves, well, I'm not an influence to somebody because I don't teach Bible class, because I don't talk to a lot of people, because I don't lead singing, or because I don't really engage with people. I'm here to tell you, you're an influence, even if it's not a positive one. I would challenge you to be a positive one, to be somebody who can teach the next generation, to teach the next generation of elders, the next generation of deacons. It's a sobering thought to think that in our Bible classes are the next generation's elders. And someday they'll look back and think about their Bible class teachers, and they'll think about the people that mattered to them when they were growing up. And they'll give credence to them, give respect to those people. I would challenge you to be that person. Whether you're teaching, whether you're an influence, be an inspiration to the next generation. I think that's one of the most powerful things that all of us can do at this point in our life, and that's how we're going to inspire revival for years to come. Jehoiada was a fantastic individual. As I mentioned earlier, Jehoiada is up there with Josiah, with Hezekiah, real pillars of the faith. But where Jehoiada really shined was not so much in what he did for himself, but in what he led Joash to do, and what he led Judah to do. And all of us, ladies and gentlemen, whether we're chief priests or not, all of us have that ability to do so. All we have to do is want to do it, to reach out, to try, to push forward, to be what God wants us to be in our relationships with each other. And if you're here this morning and for some reason you're not a Christian, what God wants you to be is He wants you to be a soldier for Him. He wants you to be a child of His. And whether that means being baptized in the water for forgiveness of sins, or laying down your burden of sin and asking for His forgiveness as you start to repent, we can accommodate both of those. We can accommodate them right now as we stand.